Our tale begins with an everyday office worker heading off to meet a client. Despite a rocky start with failed negotiations, he keeps his spirits high, looking ahead to the prospect of more successful meetings. His perseverance pays off, and he successfully secures a deal, sparking joy within him and making him eagerly anticipate a possible promotion. In a striking contrast, elsewhere a man frantically bolts from a building, a firearm in his possession, fiercely pursued by an injured policeman. Their chase concludes in a physical altercation, a discharged bullet, and the office worker is caught in the crossfire. Stunned, he collapses, his thoughts swaying between his imminent promotion celebration and his unjust end. As he nears death, he expresses sadness about the difficulties of life, and his grievances reach God's divine ear. Touched by his troubles, God bestows upon him a second chance, reincarnating him into a world filled with magic and mythical creatures. Immediately, he finds himself amidst the magnificent sight of a colossal dragon soaring above him, signaling his arrival in this fantastic realm. Discovering the drastic change of his appearance, he also learns about his new abilities granted by the divine and how to navigate in this world. Experimenting with his abilities, he summons a status window like a video game interface. He realizes the extent of his transformation. He now has the body of a 15-year-old and the freedom to control his own destiny. Hoping to forge a path more rewarding than his previous existence, he names himself Lucille. Opting for skills in martial arts, magic control, and monster taming, he settles on the role of a healer, a less hazardous occupation, considering his reluctance to engage with the dangerous creatures in this world. Armed with a meager sum of 3 silver coins, Lucille acknowledges the necessity of employment. After all, in this world, 15-year-olds are deemed adults. Suddenly, he stumbles upon a monstrous corpse and hastily retreats, haunted by the prospect of an abrupt end to his second life. His objective is simple: to live a long life without such scares. Upon reaching a city, he observes the residents brandishing their ID cards and even parting with a toll at the entrance. When his turn comes, his lack of identification puzzles the guard. However, quickly adapting, Lucille spins a story of his upbringing in a small village where he learned the healing arts, but was forced out due to the village's disinterest in his skills. His fabricated tale is met with suspicion, but he is permitted to wait while the guard fetches Lumina, a woman of the city. Reiterating his backstory, Lumina guides him to the Healers Guild, relieving his worries about the entrance fee by informing him of the special privileges given to healers. On their way to the guild, a collision with a group of adventurers prompts Lucille to reveal his novice status and his wishes to become a trustworthy healer. The encounter concludes without incident, and he follows Lumina to the Healers Guild. Along the way, he learns of the favored treatment healers receive, exempting them from most duties, as they hold lives in their hands. Upon reaching the guild, he meets the clerk, Kururu, who hands him a form to fill out. Struggling initially due to his unfamiliarity with the language, his divine-granted language skill aids him in understanding and completing it. An unexpected obstacle arises when he's asked to provide his hometown's name, to which he cleverly responds by stating he simply referred to it as the village. After he completes the form, he seizes the chance to learn the city's name from Lumina, who reluctantly informs him it's Maritani, part of the Shuru Republic. With the completed form, Kururu returns bearing his guild card and instructs him to infuse his magic into it. Successfully doing so, Lucille registers a G-ranked healer. The narrative progresses as Kururu reclaims the card, taking it back behind the scenes. Luna proceeds to explain that she's cataloging his card into the network of the Healers Guild, a process that will permit him to utilize his card at any guild worldwide. With this, Kururu extends back his card to him, reinforcing his new role as a healer. Lumina reckons her task is complete, but the story takes an unexpected turn. Lucille stumbles upon a stumbling block, admitting that he is devoid of any magic knowledge. He reveals that his village was barren of any spell books, and being the pioneer healer, he had no way of harnessing his magical abilities. Luna finds his statement bewildering but patiently lays out 3 pathways for him to learn magic. The initial approach she outlines is a Spartan-like training. Lucille would plunge into magic studies from a book, practicing it to the point of exhausting his magic. Once his magic recharges, he'd repeat the cycle until the spell gets ingrained in him. The alternative choice is a more traditional 3-year school experience to study magic, though he'd have to repay the guild for the financial support. Lastly, Luna suggests an apprenticeship with the guild, enabling him to undertake various tasks and magic studies during his leisure time. As Lucille weighs the alternatives, he finds the apprenticeship most appealing but hesitates due to uncertainties regarding his free time. He contemplates the lengthy schooling option but is quickly reminded of the crippling student loans from his past life. Spartan training seems grueling, but he's optimistic about witnessing progress akin to his former life. His optimism is reinforced by the assessed mastery skill that enables him to track his skill development. Surprisingly, he ends up picking the Spartan training route, an option that leaves both Lumina and Kururu in shock, questioning his decision-making. Lucille expresses his gratitude to Lumina, vowing to reimburse her assistance someday. Wishing him luck, Lumina guides him to his room where a spell book awaits. He immerses himself in the book, learning that every spell recital will consume his magic, but each successful attempt will boost his skill. Determined, he decides to try this out, envisioning the reversal of a wound as he articulates the healing spell. The first attempt doesn't bear any fruit, causing him to question his suitability as a healer. However, he acknowledges a slight enhancement towards his holy magic affinity. Discovering that his magic energy allows 9 more spell attempts, Lucille perseveres with his practice, even though it leaves him completely drained. It's like nursing a hangover, a sensation he's all too familiar with. As his magic eventually regains, he realizes the necessity to refine his magic control to conserve magic for each spell. The following day, Lucille wakes up feeling late but soon remembers his transformed life. Choosing to detach from his past, he centers his attention on his present world, continuing his magic training and pausing just before complete magic exhaustion. As he awaits magic replenishment, he focuses on enhancing his control over it. Repeating these steps, Lucille starts sensing some level of mastery over it, and progress is evident. Thus, his spirit remains high. During his practice, a girl named Monica visits him with some food. By his 3rd day of training, Lucille successfully casts his first healing spell. Pondering his next step, he considers seeking guidance from Lumina. Monica discloses that Lumina arranged for him to stay at the guild for 10 days. Intrigued by Lumina, Lucille wishes to know more about her, to which Monica reveals Lumina's role as the captain of the church's female paladin division. Lucille feels fortunate to have met Lumina but worries about his next move post the 10 days at the guild. Deciding to promote himself as a healer, Monica informs him about the potential to earn money with his newly learned healing spell, estimating a fair price to be 1 silver coin. Lucille is taken aback by the high value of a single spell, but Monica adds that he'd need to contribute to the guild as per his rank. With his previous business expertise, Lucille plans to secure work, but unexpectedly encounters adventurers from the past. Recognizing them and fearing their reaction, he hurriedly offers his apologies. Bazan, the group's leader, presents an opportunity for Lucille to understand more about adventures. Suddenly, a group of injured rookie adventurers surfaces. They had taken on a risky request and were reaping its harsh consequences. They seem to lack trust in the guild's clinic due to past experiences. Lucille recalls Monica mentioning the existence of corrupt healers charging excessive prices, causing the guild to throw disciplinary actions against them. However, their methods grew increasingly elusive, challenging the law to keep up with them. Reflecting on this, Lucille pledges to be an ethical healer and steps forward, offering his healing services to the injured rookies. Standing in front of the first victim, Lucille reassures her that he will heal her. He begins his healing chant, but to his shock, his magic doesn't work. One of the nearby adventurers questions what he is doing and if he is sure he can heal the injured. Lucille apologizes, acknowledging his mistake. He realizes that he didn't use his mind to visualize how the magic would work. Understanding his error, he knows that in order for the magic to work, he must create a mental image of how the injury can heal itself and be made whole. Determined, he imagines the healing process and utters the chant once again. This time, to his relief, his magic succeeds, and the wound of the first victim begins to heal. With renewed confidence, Lucille proceeds to heal the other injured adventurers. He does his best, dedicating himself to the task at hand. However, after a while, only one injured person remains. Exhaustion starts to take its toll on Lucille, and he realizes that his power is diminishing rapidly. Nevertheless, he hopes to heal the last person before fainting. But his eyes keep closing involuntarily, and eventually, he collapses, unable to carry himself any longer. Lucille recognizes that there is no way he can succeed in healing the final person. He feels a deep sense of sadness as he hears the desperate pleas of those around him, urging him to get up so that the last person doesn't die. Unfortunately, he loses consciousness, and the last injured individual tragically passes away. Lucille eventually wakes up and finds himself sitting on his bed, lost in his thoughts. He feels a profound sense of guilt and regret for not being able to save the life of the last person who needed his help. He recalls the words of the adults who assured him that what had happened wasn't his fault. The realization dawns upon him that if he wants to truly help people and heal them as he desires, he must grow his healing power and level up. Thinking about how he can achieve that, Lucille considers registering at the Adventurer Guild. He believes that by doing so, he will be able to level up quickly and increase his power effectively. Determined to pursue this path, he heads to the guild. As soon as he steps inside, he is captivated by the beautiful and impressive surroundings. Lucille approaches the attendant and expresses his intention to register at the guild. The attendant warmly welcomes him and hands him a form to fill out. Lucille eagerly takes the form and carefully provides all the necessary information. Once he completes the form, he returns it to the attendant, who confirms that he possesses martial arts skills, making him eligible for guild membership. Lucille wonders if he wouldn't have been able to join the guild without any martial arts skills. The attendant explains that having a skill is advantageous for joining the guild. She proceeds to explain the adventurer lifestyle, informing Lucille that he will take missions and receive payment upon successful completion. The guild retains 10% of the earnings as an operational fee. He wonders if there are consequences for failure, and the attendant informs him that there are penalties for unsuccessful missions. Feeling a mix of fear and determination, Lucille asks if there are specific missions for healers. He reveals his healing abilities and admits his lack of combat skills. He wonders if it's possible for him to train in both healing and martial arts at the guild. Curious, he asks if someone can provide him with training, offering his services in exchange. The attendant acknowledges his request and mentions that she needs to consult with her master, the guild leader. Lucille agrees to wait patiently while she seeks permission. A few moments later, the attendant returns with a tall and imposing man. Lucille can't help but feel intimidated by his presence. Reminding himself that he has encountered intimidating individuals before, he resolves to stay composed. The man, known as Broad, addresses Lucille as Kid and asks what he wants. Lucille articulates his desire to work as the guild healer while receiving martial arts training. Broad questions why a healer would want to learn to fight, as healers don't typically require combat skills. Lucille explains that he doesn't want to be a burden to others. He fears that his weakness could cost him his life if he encounters a powerful monster. Broad acknowledges Lucille's concerns and admits that he has a point. He agrees to train Lucille, acknowledging his determination. Lucille can't help but feel relieved. He realizes that Broad's size and appearance are not as intimidating as he initially thought. They engage in a conversation, discussing the terms of Lucille's training. Broad mentions that Lucille will receive a wage of 1 coin, and his training fee will be deducted from that amount. Lucille expresses his gratitude and requests to begin training in 5 days. Broad agrees, and Lucille is directed to an attendant who will take care of him. The attendant, named Nanaella, introduces herself with a warm smile. Lucille reciprocates the smile and shares his name. Suddenly, he feels a sense of being watched and turns to see several men observing him. As he becomes aware of their gaze, one of the men clears his throat and moves away. Lucille assumes that he holds a high position within the guild. Broad then reappears and introduces himself as the guild leader. Lucille expresses his appreciation to Broad and leaves the guild, feeling fulfilled and hopeful. Back at home, Lucille reflects on his visit to the guild and feels glad that he will soon embark on his journey to become stronger. As he contemplates the future that awaits him, Monica enters his room with his food. She inquires about his day and whether he was able to accomplish what he set out to do. Lucille excitedly tells her about his visit to the guild and how they agreed to train him in martial arts. Monica expresses her pride in him. Before leaving, Lucille asks Monica about the level he needs to reach as a healer to be considered a professional. She informs him that if he can reach level 5 before turning 20, he will be recognized as a professional healer. Lucille ponders the task ahead, realizing that he needs to increase his level by 1 each year. Monica playfully adds that if he achieves that, he will take her out on a date. Surprised by her suggestion, Lucille wonders what she means by a date. Nevertheless, he feels encouraged and determined to achieve his goal so he can take Monica out. A week later, Lucille begins his training. The crash course in holy magic flies by, and soon, he completes it. Filled with a sense of accomplishment, he returns to the Healers Guild, where he meets Kururu. He expresses his gratitude to her for staying by his side and assisting him. Recognizing his progress, Kururu praises him, describing him as a great healer. She also mentions that there is work waiting for him even before he finishes, increasing his affinity. Lucille appreciates Kururu's support and assures her that he will check up on Lumina, as per her request. Eager to continue his journey, Lucille heads back to the guild. As soon as he enters, he notices multiple eyes fixed on him. The stares feel oddly familiar, reminiscent of attending a board meeting with disappointing sales figures. He approaches the attendant, realizing that it's a different person this time, not Nanaella. He introduces himself and explains that he is the new adventurer who will be training with Broad. The attendant recognizes him and instructs him to go underground, where he will find the training center. Following the directions, Lucille arrives at the training center and sees Broad waiting for him. He realizes they are the only ones present. Broad's piercing gaze sends shivers down his spine, but Lucille refuses to show weakness. He greets Broad, who expresses surprise that Lucille didn't run away after seeing him. Broad reveals that they will be the only ones training together. Lucille feels a tinge of fear, but it doesn't compare to what he experienced on Earth. He maintains his composure and bows, assuring Broad that he is ready to learn. Broad acknowledges Lucille's courage and initiates their training. The training sessions are grueling. Broad instructs Lucille to run until exhaustion, pushing him to his limits. Lucille runs until he can't run anymore, feeling the pain and fatigue in his body. He inwardly refers to Broad as wicked but admits that compared to his life on Earth and how he died, his current existence feels like heaven. In a strange way, he embraces the physical challenges as a sign of his new life. Pushing through the pain, Lucille suddenly collapses from exhaustion. After recovering from his fatigue, Lucille finds Broad sitting on his back, screaming loudly. Startled, Lucille wonders what Broad's intentions are. Following this intense encounter, Broad instructs Lucille to fight him. Lucille musters all his strength and throws a weak strike at Broad. Disappointed, Broad questions if that's as far as Lucille can go. Lucille admits his current limitations but emphasizes his determination to improve. They conclude their training for the day, and Broad advises Lucille to train hard, pushing himself to the point of exhaustion. Broad also forbids Lucille from using magic to heal himself, stating that natural healing will strengthen his abilities. Deeply grateful for Broad's guidance, Lucille questions why there aren't more adventurers in training. Broad explains that young adventurers often lack the funds to undergo training, so they immediately venture into missions and risk facing dangers in the forest. Broad expresses his desire for Lucille to heal everyone, regardless of age or race. Lucille promises to do his best and pledges to heal anyone who seeks his help. A group of injured adventurers arrives at the scene. Initially skeptical, they doubt that Lucille would be willing to heal them. However, to their surprise, Lucille begins treating their injuries without expecting any payment in return. The adventurers' skepticism turns into gratitude as they witness Lucille's genuine compassion and skill. He realizes that healers have a negative reputation in this country, and he wants to change that perception. Broad commends Lucille's dedication, remarking that the world would be a better place with more healers like him. He invites Lucille to live at the guild, providing free lodging and meals. Feeling a sense of purpose and fulfillment in his new surroundings, Lucille agrees that he has found a place where he can make a difference. Broad, touched by Lucille's kind heart, expresses his belief that the world would be significantly better if there were more healers with the same dedication as Lucille. Lucille, although unsure of the implications of Broad's words, senses the prospect of beginning a fresh chapter in this world. Touched by Lucille's kind heart, expresses his belief that the world would be significantly better if there were more healers with the same dedication as Lucille. Lucille, although unsure of the implications of Broad's words, senses the prospect of beginning a fresh chapter in this world. Broad tells Lucille that he cannot leave until his training is complete. The notion scares Lucille, but he reluctantly agrees. Unable to think of a place to gain the necessary knowledge, they settle on a monthly renewal contract, a scheme hatched by Broad to demonstrate to Lucille how indispensable he truly is. Broad envisions a month of foundational work with Lucille, after which, he would begin serious training. Lucille expresses his concerns about the Guildmaster's potential disapproval of Broad's unilateral decision. However, Broad, full of confidence, assures him that he possesses enough authority for such arrangements. Grateful, Lucille thanks his special monster skill, Luck Sensei. He understands that this arrangement will not only enhance his martial skills, but will also provide him with accommodation, clothing, and employment. After stepping outside for a refreshing cold shower, Broad supplies Lucille with a fresh set of clothes and hastens him to the cafeteria. Confused about how to handle his dirty laundry, Lucille encounters Nanaella, who thanks him for his healing services to the adventurers. She kindly offers to take care of his laundry, an offer which he initially attempts to reject. A misunderstanding arises, with Nanaella presuming that Lucille is reluctant to let a beast folk handle his clothing. Lucille swiftly corrects the misconception, explaining his discomfort at the thought of a beautiful girl doing his laundry. She blushes at his words, takes the clothes from him, promising to return them clean the next day. Lucille surrenders, assuring her that he would gladly assist if she needed help in the future. Nanaella departs with a radiant smile, urging Lucille to join Broad, who is waiting for him. Entering the cafeteria, Lucille finds Broad seated before an enormous feast. He is baffled by the amount of food, but Broad merely instructs Lucille to consume everything. Astonished, Lucille is still encouraged by Broad's directive, and decides to treat it as a part of his training regimen. The food is so delicious that he clears the entire banquet and heads to Broad, who then shows him to his room. Despite being exhausted, Lucille finds himself unable to sleep and decides to utilize this time to practice his healing magic, like his routines at the Healers Guild. He persistently trains his magic and meditates for 3 hours until sleep eventually beckons him. The next day, Broad presents him with another breakfast feast and introduces him to Gulgar, the guild cook. Lucille is intrigued by Gulgar's hulking, bear-like figure and inquires about his race. Gulgar reveals that he is a wolfman and serves Lucille an odd beverage, claiming it to be a concoction from the Sage of Time. The drink, Substance X, has an off-putting taste reminiscent of a garbage can's contents, yet it promises to enhance his muscular strength, endurance, and reflexes. The deterrent, however, is that no one willingly drinks it for the strength benefits. Lucille, undeterred by the horrendous taste and smell of Substance X, gulps it down in one go under Gulgar's watchful gaze. He feels a sudden surge of energy coursing through his body. Gulgar, stunned by Lucille's drinking the disgusting drink, encourages him to finish his meal and join Broad. Lucille devours the meal with newfound energy as Gulgar is still in shock at his tolerance for Substance X. Lucille's training progresses at a rapid pace over the week, but he still struggles to land a hit on Broad. One day, while Lucille is down in their sparring match, Broad sternly advises him to rise, warning him of his bleak survival chances against even the weakest monsters if he fails to do so. Inspired by Broad's harsh advice, Lucille rises to his feet, addressing Broad as his instructor. This motivates Broad, who intensifies the training with a barrage of punches. Broad guides Lucille to think strategically, emphasizing that each strike serves a purpose and that his survival hinges on his ability to observe, think, and learn quickly. Their training session is interrupted by the arrival of a cat folk girl seeking healing. She inquires whether the treatment is indeed free of cost, before revealing a wound on her back inflicted by a were-rat. Lucille heals her, but advises her to visit a doctor to ensure that she isn't infected. The cat girl is moved to tears by Lucille's gentleness, causing him to worry that he might have done something wrong. Their conversation attracts the attention of the cat girl's party leader who, upon learning that Lucille treats both humans and beast folk with equal care, praises Lucille for his compassionate attitude. The leader asks if they could return for treatment in the future, to which Lucille agrees. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the cat girl hugs Lucille, while the party leader expresses his admiration for Lucille's resilience in enduring Broad's rigorous training. After the party departs, Lucille heads to the cafeteria for his meal, only to be confronted once again by Gulgar and his dreaded cup of Substance X. Under Gulgar's stern watch, Lucille has no choice but to consume the awful concoction. He retires to his room afterward but feels an unsettling sensation of being watched. His days are consumed with 12-hour training sessions, gigantic meals, and nighttime magic practice, and he doesn't understand the sudden interest people are showing towards him. When he brings up his concern to Broad and Gulgar, they both seem evasive. Lucille deduces what's going on and confronts Broad about having people watch him. Broad admits and apologizes, explaining that he doesn't want Lucille to flee. Broad elaborates that adventurer, due to their dangerous jobs and lack of education, aren't well off. If they sustain injuries and cannot work, they won't be able to survive, driving them to take on even riskier tasks. Lucille understands that adventurers can only get treatment if he is present, and they now depend on him to survive. Lucille commits to fulfilling their 1-month deal and asks Broad to trust him. Broad accepts and agrees to stop the surveillance. Lucille threatens that if he catches anyone spying on him, he will take that person to the kitchen and force them to drink Substance X. He then extends the threat to Broad, reminding him that as the leader, he will be held accountable and forced to drink it as well. A month flies by rapidly, and Lucille notices that he is receiving more social interaction. His training also evolves, focusing on his throwing abilities. He hurls a pebble at a target, but Broad criticizes the throw for lacking strength and accuracy. Lucille contemplates when his training will advance to throwing weapons, but he realizes that mastering such a skill in a month is unrealistic. Aware of the long road ahead, he commits to training under Broad for the next 3 weeks to ensure his survival in the real world. Throughout the last month, Lucille's daily doses of Substance X have increased in size, and the number of requests for his healing services has skyrocketed. As the last day of their agreement approaches, Lucille expresses his gratitude to Broad for his guidance and help over the past month. He plans to return to the Healers Guild to find work, in the hope that he can rehire Broad when he has saved enough money. Broad is surprised to hear of Lucille's financial constraints. Lucille clarifies that he needs to cover his Healers Guild fees to continue as a healer. Broad inquiries about what Lucille would do if someone provided him with the funds to pay his fees for an entire year. Lucille would, of course, use the money to hire Broad and continue his training. To his surprise, Broad presents Lucille with a bag of coins, claiming it to be his reward for a month's training and for saving the lives of adventurers. Broad tells Lucille that it's only 12 silver coins, enough to cover his Healer Guild fees for a year. Broad encourages him to accept the money, stating that Lucille's martial arts skills are still undeveloped, barely better than a random child's, and that he will need to continue his training. Lucille accepts Broad's generosity and heads out to settle his Healers Guild fees. Lucille, moved to tears, promises that he will indeed return. At the Healers Guild, Lucille pays his fees for a year. Monica, the guild staff, questions his decision, as a potential increase in his healer rank would mean an additional fee. Lucille replies that he isn't concerned with his rank now, but rather his ability to stand on his own. Monica accepts his answer and remarks that opening a clinic would require a hefty sum of money. Lucille assures her that he will seek a rank promotion once he has amassed enough money. Returning to the Adventurers Guild, Lucille is greeted by Broad. Broad, who Lucille suspected had been waiting for him, tries to pass it off as a mere coincidence and instructs Nana Ella to renew Lucille's adventurer card. Lucille is surprised that they don't need his consent for this, but Broad disregards his protests and whisks him away to the training hall, insisting they don't need to worry about a contract. After an intense training session, Broad presents Lucille with a book, a low-level holy magic tome. Broad explains that the gift is a treat for Lucille, who has returned home in time. Lucille initially feels as though they are treating him like a child, but Broad clarifies that a true healer requires both a healing spell and a detoxification spell. Lucille acknowledges their support and vows to train even harder. Gulgar arrives with another dreadful dose of Substance X. Lucille downs it in one gulp, causing Broad and Gulgar to stare in disbelief. But Lucille is resolved. He promises himself to knock Broad down within a year as revenge for making him drink the dreaded Substance X. The sun rises, and it's another day of training as Broad and Lucille team up once more. To Lucille's surprise, Broad suggests giving him a day off, something he hasn't had since he began his training. This leaves Lucille feeling a bit confused about what to do next. However, Broad comes up with an interesting idea. He recommends that Lucille learns how to butcher some monsters. Though puzzled, Lucille understands that it's essential to get familiar with these creatures. With that in mind, Lucille sets out on his off day, strolling down the hallway until he reaches the cafeteria where the butcher, Gala, awaits. Strangely enough, Gala bears an uncanny resemblance to Gulgar, the chef. They prepare to start the butchering process, and to Lucille's amazement, Gala pulls out a massive boar from a tiny bag. Lucille can't wrap his head around how such a huge thing could fit inside such a small bag, but Gala laughs and explains that it's a magical bag. With patience and care, Gulgar guides Lucille through the step-by-step process of butchering the boar, even explaining the logistics of transporting the meat. But then, he looks at Lucille with a meaningful expression and reveals that butchering isn't the only reason Broad sent him there. As the butcher's place boasts a wide variety of monsters, Lucille soon learns that he's here to discover their weak points and the best ways to attack them. The mere thought of fighting real monsters sends shivers down Lucille's spine. You see, Lucille is skilled as a healer, but the idea of facing these creatures in combat terrifies him. However, Galga kindly explains to Lucille that his presence has made a significant difference. Since Lucille arrived, the fatality rate among adventurers has drastically declined. Hearing this, Lucille feels a sense of pride in his accomplishments. To continue their lesson, Gala surprises Lucille by pulling out a horned rabbit beast from his magical bag. This sight freaks Lucille out a bit, but he tries to keep his composure. Although it's already dead, Lucille can't help but feel hesitant as he touches the raw meat. The reality of this process sinks in. It's an essential part of life, even if it makes him uneasy. Deep down, he knows that understanding these creatures better will ultimately benefit everyone, and this thought brings him a sense of calm amidst his initial discomfort. Later in the evening, after a day of butchering, Lucille is utterly exhausted, slumped at the bar. Gulgar, noticing his smelly clothes, advises him to change. Lucille steps outside to wash his clothes, and he's approached by Nanella, who seems genuinely concerned about his well-being. However, as tired as he is, Lucille can't help but imagine Nanella as the very bunny he had just dissected earlier. It's a bizarre thought that leaves him feeling a bit unsettled. Despite his uneasiness, Nanella takes hold of Lucille's hand and offers him comfort, understanding that the day must have been tough for him. She explains that even for seasoned adventurers, slaying monsters without hesitation can be incredibly difficult. Lucille finds solace in knowing that Nanella feels the same sense of remorse as he does. Later in the night, Lucille blesses his meal, a dish made out of the rabbit beast he had butchered earlier. As he enjoys his food, all seems to be going smoothly until Gulgar approaches him with yet another cup of Substance X. The next day, Broad surprises Lucille with another rest day, and he finds himself pondering how to spend it. Lucille notices that the stronger he becomes, the harder it is to level up, just like in a role-playing game. Lost in thought, he turns a corner and is suddenly grabbed by Nanella, Manila, and Meryl, who have decided to teach him a lesson. With playful determination, they led him down the hall and into the library. In the library, sitting at a table, the girls present Lucille with books on monsters, armor crafting, laws, religions, food mythology, and medicine. Lucille wonders if delving into all this knowledge is truly necessary. However, he decides to start with books on monsters, which seems to disappoint the other two girls as they get up and leave him alone with Nanella. He worries that Nanella might get into trouble for spending too much time with him, but she smiles and reassures him that it's part of her job to assist him. Nanella points out different places on the map and explains who manages what. Lucille is surprised to learn that the country he's currently in is the only one that has abolished slavery. From that point onward, Lucille dedicates his rest days to studying, balancing between training, learning from books, and completing various errands. As a year and a half passes by, Lucille becomes noticeably stronger and more muscular. He proudly holds the guild's earning ranking high while examining the monthly rankings, where the lineage of the White Wolf sits at the top again. As the girls playfully press up against him, Lucille feels a bit embarrassed and politely asks them to back up, resulting in a playful tickle session. They notice that his clothes no longer fit, so they decide to go shopping for new ones. Lucille compliments Nanella on her outfit, as he isn't used to seeing her in street clothes. Together, they hit the shops, trying on a wide variety of outfits. Lucille expresses his gratitude to Nanella for paying for everything, but she surprises him by explaining that Broad gave her the money to spend. Out of the blue, a woman begins to scream, and Lucille runs toward where the sound came from. He was shocked to see Monica lying in a pool of her own blood. Later that night, Monica regains consciousness, finding herself in the guild with Nanella and Lucille by her bedside. She has no recollection of what happened, and Lucille explains that he tried to cast heal on her, but it had no effect, so he had to resort to using cure for her recovery. Nanella speculates that it might have been the work of a mercenary, leaving Lucille wondering who could have paid to poison Monica. Monica shares a distressing story about how healers can be ruthless, mentioning a friend who got sold into slavery because she couldn't afford to pay for the services of the person who healed her. Public objection to the healer's actions could have led to the attempted assassination. Lucille is concerned that they might try to poison Monica again, but she reveals that she suspects Bataculi to be behind the attempt. Nanella informs Lucille that Bataculi runs the largest healer guild in the country. Lucille advises Monica to hide out at the Adventurers Guild until the situation calms down. Despite the tense relationship between healers and adventurers, Lucille reassures Monica that she will be safe there. In the cafeteria, Lucille is deeply concerned about the value of life in this world. He makes a promise to himself that he will continue to work hard until he becomes strong enough to make a difference. Monica walks in, looking pale, and expresses her gratitude to Lucille for his help. She asks how much she owes him, but Lucille insists that she has already done enough for him, and he is merely returning the favor. He kindly offers her some food, which touches Monica deeply, and she is surprised by the kindness shown by everyone in the guild. The man responsible for attacking Monica is eventually apprehended about a month later, but they never discover who hired him. Monica decides to stay at the Adventurers Guild and work there instead of the Healers Guild, a decision that fills the guild members with joy and cheer. 2 months later, Broad bursts into the guild looking for Lucille, which surprises him. Broad urgently informs him that there are adventurers close to death after being attacked at a coal mine in the southeast. Lucille and Broad rush to the injured party located at the inn. When they arrive, Lucille is shocked to see the extent of the injuries, with many people laid out in pain. Guided by Broad, Lucille attends to Basura, who is the most severely wounded. Despite the difficulty, he manages to save Basura using multiple healing spells. As he attempts to move on to the other injured adventurers, he becomes weak due to his low HP. Broad quickly provides him with a magic potion, which restores his strength. Lucille then begins to heal everyone in the room, but the exertion takes a toll, and he eventually passes out. The next day, Lucille wakes up to find Nanella by his bedside, fast asleep in a chair. He feels a sense of relief knowing that he managed to save 3 members of the lineage of the White Wolf, but he can't help feeling sorrow for the inevitable deaths of the others. It's a reminder of the harsh reality they face as adventurers in this world. With tears in his eyes, Lucille becomes even more determined to work harder than ever before. As a year passes, Lucille takes a moment to reflect on his growth and achievements. He looks over his stats, feeling a swell of pride in how far he has come. His hard work and dedication have paid off, and he now stands stronger than ever, both in skills and character. He now sports a long ponytail, symbolizing his growth and evolution. Lucille sets off for the Healers Guild. Upon arrival, he visited the guild to renew his membership and was surprised to find an exhausted Kururu there. Lucille questioned his presence and expressed annoyance. Kururu mentioned that working had become tough since he took Monica to join the Adventurous Guild. She has been trying to hire new employees, but nobody comes forward. Confused, Lucille looks around because the only hard work she's doing right now is breathing and complaining. He defends his decision, explaining that it was safer for Monica at the Adventurers Guild since someone was after her life. He then gave Kururu his card to renew his membership. Kururu told him to wait a minute and discovered something surprising while checking his card. She asked how he was living and what crazy training methods he had been doing. Lucille explained that he was staying at the Adventurers Guild. Kururu couldn't believe it and asked for more details. Lucille shared his experiences and his goal to improve self-defense and holy magic skills. Kururu thought he sounded like a weirdo, but Lucille explained that he just wanted to improve his self-defense skills so he doesn't get killed, and healers can improve faster with higher patient volume. As Lucille contemplates his decision to train at the Adventurers Guild rather than the clinic, Kururu then questions why he couldn't improve his skills at the clinic, where he would also get paid for healing. Lucille explains that there's a difference between healing for money and receiving a reward from a satisfied patient. He emphasizes that learning to defend himself is something money cannot buy. After realizing her mistake, Kururu apologizes. Kururu proposes raising his healer rank since he has reached the required skill level. She explains that although his tax will increase, he will gain access to more powerful spells. Lucille is curious and asks about the cost of the grimoire, which turn out to cost 90 pieces of silver. He is shocked by the high price and wonders if they're trying to steal from him. Checking his pocket, he realizes he only has 3 silver coins to his name. It becomes apparent that he needs to find a job that pays well to afford the grimoires and manage his expenses. Suddenly, Broad appears behind Lucille and drops a bag of money on the counter. He proposes a deal to the Healer Guild, loan Lucille to the Adventurous Guild for a year for 1 gold coin, with the guild covering his wages. Initially startled by Broad's sudden appearance, Lucille asks what he's doing there. Broad explains that he forgot to give Lucille his payment and then extends the offer for him to be a regular resident of the Adventurers Guild. Lucille, still surprised, accepts the request, mentioning that he hasn't managed to hit Broad yet and that he'd love to work for the guild if he's paid accordingly. Kururu whispers to him, asking if he's sure about his decision, but Lucille explains that Broad is his instructor and a trustworthy person. He then accepts the request, and she wishes him good luck. With the money, Lucille buys some spell tomes and returns to his room in the Adventurers Guild. He sets a new goal for the next year to learn as much magic as possible. Soon after, Broad knocks on his door, reminding him that it's time to get dinner. Lucille realizes he must become strong enough to travel safely. As they head towards dinner, Lucille is taken aback to discover a warm reception awaiting him. The adventurers have gathered, clapping and cheering to welcome him back. Broad happily explains that it's a welcome party since he is now a temporary employee of the guild. During the festivities, Gulgar offers Lucille some substance X. The smell is so repulsive that everyone takes a step back from him. Reluctant to drink it, Lucille is persuaded by Goldberg and the others to do so just to avoid the smell. Raising his glass, Lucille makes a toast to the adventurers who accepted and helped him during his time there. He wishes them all to come back alive from their missions and expresses his desire to work with them for another year. He then bravely chugs down his glass, shocking everyone who can't believe he's willing to drink it. While Lucille is eating his meal, Basin and his group approach him, commenting on his smell. Basin then asks a surprising question, inquiring if Lucille is interested in guys. Lucille is taken aback by the question but explains that he has been mostly focused on training with Broad. He spends some time with the receptionist girls but refrains from making any moves, fearing Broad's reaction. He clarifies that he has been prioritizing training to increase his chances of survival and hasn't had time to pursue romantic interests. Lucille confesses that he was initially terrified during his first 6 months in this new world, as carrying weapons casually is not common where he comes from, though he momentarily forgets how he died in his original world. Basin pats Lucille's head and assures him that nobody will pick a fight with him in their town, and if anyone dares, Basin and his group will protect him. However, Basin playfully brings up the topic again, asking if Lucille is truly into girls and proposing to go out for some adult fun. Lucille gets excited, not aware that such places exist in town. However, Monica interrupts them by calling out Lucille's name. Worried that she overheard their conversation, Lucille is relieved when she asks about the Healers Guild. He replies, mentioning that Kururu seemed bored, and asks if Monica is enjoying her stay at the Adventurers Guild. Monica expresses her love for it, especially because she gets to see her savior, Lucille. The situation between them becomes tense as they both blush, and Lucille finds himself making a move on a girl for the first time. However, they stop when they realize Basin and the others are watching them. Meanwhile, in another part of town, Bada Cully, the leader of the biggest healer clinic, is troubled by a decline in profits and slave acquisitions. His men blame Lucille, who now works for the Adventurers Guild, for the city's situation. The next day, as Lucille is resting from his training, he overhears Nana telling Bada Cully that he cannot enter the training grounds. Bada Cully then approaches Lucille and asks if he is the healer living in the Adventurers Guild. When Lucille confirms, Bada Cully rudely calls him an impudent brat. Lucille inquires about his identity, and Bada Cully introduces himself as the owner of a clinic. Lucille finally recognizes the name and realizes that Bada Cully is the same person who tried to assassinate Monica. The old man arrogantly orders Lucille to quit working at the Adventurers Guild and work at his clinic instead. However, Lucille firmly refuses, explaining that he is here on an official transfer. This infuriates Bada Cully, who claims that Lucille cannot refuse a merciful direct order from him. Lucille counters that true mercy doesn't involve threats or forcing someone to quit their job. He questions why he should work for Bada Cully, who becomes even angrier and reveals that people have stopped going to his clinic since Lucille joined the Adventurers Guild. Lucille points out that people avoid a place with a bad reputation, explaining the reason for the decline in Bada Cully's business. As Bada Cully continues to argue with Lucille, the young healer points out several situations and asks what kind of spell Bada Cully would use. Surprisingly, Bada Cully admits to using high heel and charging a hefty 30 pieces of gold. When Lucille questions what happens if a patient can't afford such a price, Bada Cully smugly replies that it's a trade secret but assures he has a way to ensure payment. Lucille then exposes Bada Cully's dark secret: he is selling patients to other countries. Lucille argues that most of the situations he mentioned only require low-level healing spells, like heal or middle heal, to save the patients, so Bada Cully is extorting them. However, Bada Cully insists on using high-level magic and charging exorbitant fees to maximize his profit per patient. Lucille believes that using appropriate spells and reasonable prices will result in more long-term earnings, but Bada Cully is solely focused on immediate profits. Lucille strongly believes that healing magic should be used to save lives, but Bada Cully dismisses his naivety, saying that he used to think like that when he was younger. He adds that healers are often insulted and attacked when they cannot save people after exhausting their magic. At that moment, Bada Cully explodes with anger and orders his men to kill Lucille. They draw their weapons, but before any harm can be done, Broad suddenly appears and restrains them. He threatens to investigate Bada Cully's business, sending the old man fleeing in fear. Lucille thanks Broad for saving him, and his instructor is surprised that the biggest healer in town is interested in Lucille. Lucille mentions that Bada Cully was probably a good healer at one point. A few days later, Broad informs Lucille that troublemakers have been asking about him, and Lucille dismisses it, thinking he hasn't done anything shady in over a year. However, Broad warns him that they might target him to gain favor with Bada Cully. Considering the current situation, Broad decides to change Lucille's training focus from healing to a Spartan regime. Lucille is confused as he's just a healer, but Broad assures him not to worry and promises to double his training intensity while increasing his meals and substance X portions. Under this new rigorous training regime, Lucille faces the normal daily beatings, but never gives up. People are astonished by Lucille's resilience, and he earns a new nickname, the Healer Maso Zombie. Though annoyed by the name, he doesn't let it deter his determination to keep going. A few days later, Lucille discusses with Monica that more people have been joining the training ground, following his example, and the survival rates have improved. As he heads down to train, Broad asks if he can use a barrier spell. Lucille confirms, and Broad throws him to the ground, impressed that he didn't get injured or die. Confused, Lucille asks why, Broad explains that he will need to use it because his training is about to become even more painful. Lucille is told by Broad to learn how to use a sword and shield. Despite feeling discouraged, Broad reminds him that he has spent a year building Lucille's physical foundation. While he may not be exceptionally talented, his hard work has impressed Broad, who wants to take him on as an apprentice. Initially perplexed, Lucille eventually agrees to accept Broad as his master. Broad then prohibits Lucille from checking his status and skill levels in the future. He explains that relying on numbers can distract Lucille from the true path to becoming powerful. Broad emphasizes the importance of mental fortitude and strategic thinking in achieving true strength. Lucille embraces these instructions and prepares for the real training by activating his barrier. During the training, Broad teaches Lucille a new perspective on the fight. Instead of avoiding his master, Lucille decides to strike back with determination and rushes forward to face the challenge head-on. From that day on, Lucille spends 6 days per week training, dedicating 1 day per weapon type to learn as many skills as possible. Meanwhile, Bada Cully receives another report about Lucille's healing costs, and he becomes infuriated when he learns that Lucille is only charging 1 silver coin per healing spell. He fears that such reasonable prices will drive him out of business, so he decides to write a letter to the head of the Healers Guild, falsely accusing Lucille of charging absurd prices and requesting him to be transferred. With that, our episode comes to an end. Feel free to comment if you're interested in following more of this exciting series. Thanks for your time. If you stayed until the end, please like and subscribe for more.